it's the idea of like, when God puts you in a season, like accepting the fact that you're there and believing so much in the outcome that this roadblock that you see as a roadblock is actually not a roadblock. It's an opportunity.
What's up, everyone? You're listening to the Do Hard Things podcast by Elite SRS. The purpose of this show is to share stories of hardship and victory as an encouragement for those in the middle of their own hard thing. Because we know hardship produces perseverance, which produces character, which ultimately produces hope. Today's guest is Ryan Husband. Ryan is a former collegiate soccer player and the founder of activewear brand LRX Apparel, which means Live Prescribed. Ryan talks about everything from starting his business to a season of intense anxiety and depression in college to moving across the country and running his business remotely. Through it all, Ryan can count on the faithfulness of God and is able to tackle challenges head on with optimism and hope because of the hardships he's walked through so far. If you enjoy the show, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so more people can be encouraged by the stories we share. Now here's the conversation with Ryan Husband. All right, got Ryan Husband on the podcast. Dude, super excited to have you, and thanks for being willing to spend some time with us.
Yeah, man, looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, let's give the people some context. So when people ask you what you do, how do you answer that question?
So yeah, I mean, I own an activewear company. It's called LRX Apparel. LRX means Live Prescribed. We create clothing that's a prescription to your active lifestyle, clothing you train in, live in, or rest in, clothes you can wear anywhere. But my main passion is impacting people through a brand that has a message that means more than just the clothing that we create.
Okay, so unpack all that a little bit.
Yeah, man.
That's a significant statement. But,
Yep.
How does that get fleshed out in the company LRX?
So I'll just give you a little bit more of a background kind of me, because I basically just gave you the message that I would say to somebody when somebody walks up to the booth at an event or whatever.
Yeah, that sounded like you had said it before.
I would just say, for work, I own an activewear company. Like that's literally what I would say. Yeah. But kind of the background of LRX and kind of who we are, our biggest goal is to create products that can solve a physical problem that people have, but in that we want to give a message to them. So we get the opportunity to give them a product that solves the problem. They need clothing that they can wear anywhere, but in that we solve the physical problem, and then we're looking to solve another problem. We want to be a brand that is focused on really great customer experience that builds relationships and that builds impact for longevity that can actually make a difference in somebody's life. If we look at the industry as a whole, you see all these activewear brands, you see all these companies that are popping up all over the place, and they're trying to solve a problem, right? But What opportunity do they have to actually help people to grow in their life and become a better version of themselves rather than just putting on clothing that doesn't really have a message or a story behind it that can be passed on to somebody else? Because the way that people grow in their life is from one person helping another person to get to the place that they want to go, right? It's like I'm who I am today based on all the people that have helped me to get to where I am. And our big goal with LRX is to really build a solid community of people that can help other people grow in their life. And we just happen to use clothing to do that.
Right. So it's not, because you could have two different models. You could have a transactional business model where it's like, hey, how do I move as many of these pieces of clothing as possible? Or you can have a relationship where it's like, it's not just, hey, thanks for buying. It's like, hey, let's stay connected. Let's have some kind of back and forth here and have some more significance or meaning than just the sale.
100%, man. And I think that's the way that business is going in general right now. I mean, if you look at businesses as a whole, after the pandemic, you have businesses that are wondering why they can't keep employees working for them, wondering why they can't keep business. It's because people are weeding out what provides them value. And if you can provide value more than just the product that you're providing, if you can provide value in addition to that, you're not going to lose your clientele and you're not going to lose your employees because you're creating something that people want to be around and that they were actually intentionally created to receive anyways.
Right. No, and it's a good point too, right? In that, like, you got to do it internally as much as you are doing it externally, or it's just inauthentic anyways. Like, your people have to reflect that from the top down.
Yeah, man. 100%.
Yeah. So, okay, you've got this company, you've got this vision, but why activewear? Where did the like recognition of the problem come from?
Yeah, man, it's always interesting kind of sharing this story because it goes back a way. So when I was in high school, I always thought, I'm going to go to college. I really loved style and aesthetic and clothing and stuff like that. I shopped at all like the name brands back in high school,
Okay.
Abercrombie and Fitch. I would wear Express. I would always make sure that my style was on point. I wanted to look good because it made me feel good, realistically.
Look good, feel good.
Yeah, right. And I really love the idea of marketing and branding. So when I was in high school, I would take those types of classes, or I'd go to college and wanted to be on that side of things. So I went to college, got a degree in marketing, played college soccer as well. So I'd been in like the sports scene for quite a bit of time. The goal was to play professional soccer. But then I got kind of involved in CrossFit and really liked that. So I like the idea of working out. And in doing those types of things and just making that part of my lifestyle, because I use that to supplement for my sports. So to be a better athlete, I used, working out to make sure that I could be better in that so that I could perform the best. But I didn't really love, like, I guess all the expectation that came with it that began to become not as fun as just like doing it to do it. Right.
Right.
And my sophomore year of college, I went through a really challenging season of life, which kind of spurred the idea of LRX and what it is. My grandma passed away, parents were getting a divorce. I was in a relationship, came to an end. And I had just quit college soccer, which was really a lot of my identity. My whole entire life, I played soccer from the age of, 3 or 4 all the way up until I was in my 20s. And by the time that I was done with college soccer, I was like, who am I now? I built my whole entire life up until this point. Who am I without this sport? And then all the other things that had happened in my life up until that point really got me into this dark hole of life, of like not really knowing. And I always say, like, anxiety comes when things happen outside of the way that you anticipated them happening, because you can't predict, like, you thought what you predicted isn't the outcome.
Yeah.
So
No control.
for me, it ended up turning into like a really bad struggle with anxiety and depression. Growing up, my parents were always arguing. It was a really, really rough household that I lived in from that regard. My parents were great in and of themselves, but they didn't get along. So living in that, constantly kind of on the edge of like, okay, are they going to get a divorce? Asking that question my whole entire life. And when it actually happened, it really rocked my world, right alongside of my grandma passing away and ending my own relationship that was going on for quite some time. And all of that stuff led into this transition into this struggle with anxiety and depression that really defined what my relationship with God looked like at the time. At 16 years old, I accepted Jesus. That was kind of like what my relationship with God looked like. And then over time, after going through that really big challenge, I feel like that was the first real big mountain in my life that kind of was, okay, God, like, God's testing me. Like, okay, you've accepted me into your life, but like, how do I actually carry that out now? And how do I actually live it out? So there's like this first challenge. And the Bible says in Romans 5, suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope. Right.
Yeah.
So like, you can't have hope without suffering and challenges in your life. So I'm never going to be able to see like the outcome of something unless I suffer. Right. And go through something. So that period of time, I really believe God obviously was using over time. And growing up, I had a ton of skill sets. I was good at sports. I had good relationships with people. People liked me. I was smart. I knew how to make money, like all this different stuff. But just that alone wasn't going to be able to be the thing that was going to help me to get to where I needed to go, because with that came a sense of pride that God needed to humble. So with that, Paul in 2 Corinthians 12 basically says Paul is able to like dream dreams and have visions, but a messenger of Satan is given to harass him, a thorn in his flesh. And Paul, pleads with God, God, take this from me. And God says, no, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So for me, the anxiety and depression was actually like the thorn in my flesh that I pleaded with God for him to take, but he wouldn't take because he knew what he wanted to use it for.
Right.
And so through that season of life, I felt like God was humbling me to prepare me for what he was calling me to in the future. And that wasn't, that wasn't just starting a business to make transactions. That was starting a business to make impact and to genuinely serve other people through it, and be humble enough to do it in a way that wasn't for myself, but that was for the opportunity to serve others, and make a real impact. And there's other parts of my life that have happened since then that God is reminding me of that season of my life as the business grows or whatever it may be. But that's kind of like the background of the story. So you say, why activewear, why clothing, right? Yeah. I made a couple of shirts when I was a freshman in college, or when I was a junior in college after I transitioned from the school that I was playing soccer at. And I was going to make some t-shirts to start branding my brand because I wanted to open a gym. Okay. And then I quickly realized that the message that God wanted to share wasn't something that was just going to be what he wanted to impact in a local environment. He wanted to be something that could scale to be shared everywhere. And so a gym wasn't going to be that option, because when you run a business as a gym, it's kind of stuck in that one place, right? In one local region. So transition from there, t-shirts were selling well, and I started adding more t-shirts to the line, and somehow transition happened. I didn't really know, I was just selling t-shirts, and it was just a side hustle because I always had done something fun, entrepreneurial minded. But it transitioned into okay, well, actually, I think this is, we're going to do an activewear company. And there wasn't really a direct moment of I'm running an activewear company and that was my goal, but it switched to that. It was just Ryan's selling some t-shirts at the local events around the corner. And then somehow I'm sitting here now. We got an activewear. So, which is just, I never actually really thought about that transition into, or desire growing up. It wasn't really a huge desire. It just happened to make sense, and started going, and didn't want to fail. So I just kept buying more stuff and selling more stuff. And so that's where it kind of was. And the whole message of LRX, meaning to live prescribed, is there's a prescription for life, right? If you align with it, no matter who you are, whether you believe in God or not, if you align with that prescription for life, you will have a better outcome for your life than if you don't. Right. I don't care who you are. I believe that everybody was created by God for God and his purpose, right? So give that prescription to anybody. If they act with kindness, you know what I mean? That's going to make a better impact on your life. You can't argue that. People want to be kind. They want to be, they want to be giving. They want to be loving. They want to be caring, right? Totally. Why do they want to be that way? Well, they want to be that way because they were created by God, and these are attributes of him. So that's where you just can't argue this prescription of life that we have in front of us, And that's what we want to share with people, the prescription of life, which is really purpose and aligning with God's intention. But we do it in a way that serves the messages. The message is impactful to anybody. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's truth is truth, regardless of how you skin it, right? It's all, truth's going to rise to the top at the end of the day. 100%. And so present it how you want to, but people will resonate with it. And what we would both agree on is that ultimately truth, it originates from the creator of everything that exists, right? From God. And so live prescribed. Yeah, man. Dude, thanks for sharing that. That's it's so fun to hear people's stories and some of the origins for stuff. Because I think a lot of times, we assume people's stories. And dude, having done this podcast for a little bit, I'm just always wrong. So it's it's good to ask questions. Yeah. What was your assumption? What was your assumption here? I don't know if I've ever shared that with you. No, you haven't shared it with me. And honestly, my assumption was that, because I think when I met you at Rogue, whatever that was, year-ish ago, it was hey, we want to, the line that stuck in my head was, it's affordable Lululemon. So I thought the problem was, hey, this quality clothing is too expensive, or it's just overpriced. It doesn't need to be. Right. Let's give people high quality stuff at a reasonable price. And so that's where the origin of apparel came from. And then obviously the worldview and what you believe in was attached to that. So that was kind of my assumption, but it's way deeper. So, man. It's interesting because we kind of went down that line before, and we're we were kind of using that line as a messaging, and we're still figuring out at that time we were still figuring out like who we were and what we wanted to do. And now at this point we're like, okay, we're not going to use the word Lululemon because we're actually trying to be as big as Lululemon. So why use the competitor as a comparison? Right. You know what I mean? So it's like, so yeah, we've transitioned that perspective, and even too, like, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot that way because price points are constantly changing, and there's a reason that Lulu charges what they charge. You know what I mean? Not to say that we'll charge those prices, but I think
that's not driving your business. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So.
Yeah. Cool. So, what has been one of the biggest surprises in the last few years with running this business that like you just didn't see it coming?
Yeah, man. I didn't see it. I think I'm constantly surprised by the way that it grows. We grow slow. Like we're not putting tons of money into paid advertisement and trying to blow this thing up. We don't have any athletes, and kind of for a reason. We just don't do that. We serve and build relationships with local communities. So I think what surprised me is if I look back over a year, I see I see tons of growth, right? But if I look back over like from yesterday to today, I'm like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? But like, what surprises me is like the amount of stuff that I can accomplish in a year worth of time, as opposed to looking at things by like a week or couple day basis. That's what constantly surprises me. And what also surprises me, and I don't know, this may have to do with, like my faith and just the ways that God kind of gives me insight into things. Almost everything that we say we're going to do or we want to do like ends up happening. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And that's been consistent across the board for everything that we've really said in business, and even just in my personal life. I really believe that like when you ask God for wisdom, God will give you wisdom if you ask him confidence and faith that he provided, just like it says in James. But I, like truly, like when I ask God for wisdom, or when I ask him to give me insight on certain things, or when he gives me a perspective, like anything that you want to accomplish is possible as long as you believe that it's possible to accomplish, and it can happen. You just take the right steps to get to where you want to go and make an absolute belief and just bet on the outcome. Like realistically, I was talking to my fiance the other day who just, quit her full-time job so that she could hop on the train to work with LRX. And I basically was just like thinking of this idea of like, if you believe so wholeheartedly in the outcome of what you're building, nothing along the way is going to trip you up from getting there. It doesn't matter what the bank account says. It doesn't matter if inventory arrives 3 months late, like it does not matter because you believe in the outcome. Think about like, this is just an interesting realization, but think about like Jesus dying on the cross and the outcome of that. Like he's going through all of this stuff, knowing full well what needs to happen, but believes so much in the outcome that he's willing to endure the pain along the way.
Yeah, right. It's what is it? Hebrews 12, the joy set before him.
Yeah.
Endure the cross, right?
100%. Yeah. It's like every bit of life, if you take attributes of the Bible and like apply it, it's like, it's there. It's the roadmap, And, so that's been the biggest surprise to me, I guess, is just like, the amount of time it takes to accomplish something is always more than you anticipate and more than you expect. But like the outcomes that you want to happen will come to fruition if you're patient to allowing the outcome to happen in not your time.
Right. Well, I'll commend you, man, on the conviction. I like easier said than done, easier said than done. I think that's a lot of people's struggle is like, and honestly, internally here, it can be the struggle is like, okay, North Star's here, but there's like rabbit, distraction, wave crashing, like all the things that can happen that like take this and kind of fog it or blur it or force you to want to like realign it or consider it's not that worth it. And so like, it is a matter of like when, if you continue to go that direction. Yeah. But it's like, how do you maintain the conviction? I was thinking, I was actually really convicted personally at the end of the book of John, the disciples, Jesus did all these things, right? Like the book of John says, if everything was written down that Jesus did, the world wouldn't be big enough to contain all the books. Like, but like, so these dudes walked with Jesus. They saw all that stuff. He rose from the dead and showed up. And then at the end of the book of John, they're like back fishing, they lost their North Star. Yeah. I don't know how, like if anybody in the history of the world was like not going to lose it, It'd be those guys.
Yeah,
and
right.
They did. And
Yeah.
I was like, man, they just went back to what was comfortable. They played
Right.
it safe, right? Like they went back to doing what they were doing before Jesus. I was like, man, how often do I do that? Like,
Yeah,
how
right.
often do I play it safe? And it's hard to maintain the conviction because life just throws so much at you.
Yeah, 100%. I think that you have to make sure that you set especially as a leader, like if you're bouncing all over the place, like your team's going to be confused and they're not going to know what to do. If you give them the goals and the roadmap to getting where they want to go or where we need to go, and you tell them what's most important, they're going to do those things. They're going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So you better be ready to give them a plan of action that's going to help them get where we need to go or where they need to go. And you need to say it over and over and over again to remind them of where they're going and why, right? And how, and everything else that goes along that path, like push it off to the side. It's like our relationship with God. Like anything that stops us up from being able to pursue Jesus, like that is our North Star. Like if anything that stops us up from being able to pursue Jesus, whether it's temptation, idolatry, like any type of sin along the way, money, right? Like health. Those things aren't going to get you the outcome that you want. So you have to make sure that everything that you're doing aligns with those things. And then you ask the question, does this align? No. Okay. We're not doing it.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to move forward on that. Like don't
totally.
And especially when you have a message that is so much intended to impact people from a Christian perspective and a biblical perspective, like Satan hates that. Like 100% hates it.
Yeah.
Right. And
ain't about it.
Yes, 100%. So,
and as there's an element of patience, right? Like it may not be happening as fast as you want it to.
Right.
And it's like, how do you continue to just keep putting one foot in front of the other instead of deciding I want a quicker result? And so, I mean, the patience part equally challenging.
I always say
it's a long journey.
I would say the idea of like aggressive patience, like you can be patient, but then you can be even more patient than you're being right now. And I honestly, like, I suck at being patient.
Yeah.
Like Maggie, my fiance, will say that over and over and over again. She's like, you suck at that. And I'll tell her, like, I suck at being patient. Like, I don't want to wait. I want the outcome right now. Why do I have to go through the process to get to the outcome? And the amount of things that I learned along the way, it's worth the patience and the waiting to get there. So,
well, it's good that you can recognize that. I'm the same way, man. I'm like, good God, just make me more patient, like flip the switch. But that's like not how it works. He's like, okay, cool. I'm going to put you in a lot of opportunities to like grow in your patience. And it's like, this is not what I was asking for. So, well, we could probably sit in this conversation for a long time, but let's transition to the kind of central question for the podcast. And again, the purpose of this podcast is to encourage people, like in the middle of a hard season, how do you like gain perspective and have some hope? And we just have decided people's stories are a great way to do that. Like it's good health for them.
Yeah, man. So in the middle of a challenge, how do I change my perspective? It's something that I learned in counseling when I was struggling with anxiety and depression. It's just the idea of reframing your perspective. I've been going through a season like that, like recently, just moved to Hawaii, was running the business on the mainland for quite some time. And like for 5 years, I was running the business on the mainland. And for me, the transition to Hawaii wasn't just like this sweet, awesome opportunity that was like, it's going to be beautiful living in Hawaii. This is great. Like walking into, getting married, all those different things, like all those things are great in and of themselves. But like the challenge with the transition from being able to run my business, on regular time zone, 5 hour time now, right, it's been really, really hard. It's even been hard from an identity perspective. Nobody knows me here. Like I'm not walking to the office, so that challenge I've been going through recently is me. And I just like, we were at a competition this past weekend. I competed and we were running our first event in Hawaii. And Maggie, I took her aside and I was literally just like crying. I was like, Maggie, like I need some type of like revival right now in my life. Like pray for me because like I'm struggling and she's seen it, I have been grumpy, like not been the best person in the entire world. Right. And I was like, I'm really frustrated right now. And even like in some ways, like frustrated, at God in a way of like, okay, what am I doing here? Like, I feel like I'm stopping this mission that you've given me to like keep pushing this thing forward. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, what's going on? And it's the idea of like, when God puts you in a season, like accepting the fact that you're there and believing so much in the outcome that this roadblock that you see as a roadblock is actually not a roadblock. It's an opportunity, and like believing so much in that, regardless of what you thought the perspectives needed to be, that the outcome is still going to happen, and it's probably going to happen better than you thought. So like reframing your perspective on the current situation to make it a perspective that actually serves you and doesn't pull you away from the goal.
Yeah.
Right? How can we use this season to make it better? And that's exactly what I did with LRX. My life was being lived outside of God's intention. I had my identity wrapped up in my college athletics. Divorce from my parents kind of like messed me up, right? Like, my relationship that came to an end, like, like those challenges and those heartbreaks that we go through, like I literally, like LRX is a representation of using that struggle for impact and good. Right. So like use the challenge. And I think that's something that I've done well at over time, is using the challenge and being resilient to the outcome. Like knowing that you're going to get there, just like be okay with the current situation and use it to your advantage. So now it's like, okay, we're building really good relationships here in Hawaii, like building some strong connections. LRX never been this far west.
Yeah.
Like this is an opportunity for us to get integrated in the islands. Hawaii is a trend setting location, like for activewear and brands and businesses. It's aspirational. Like, why don't you use that to your advantage? Like, great place to create content. Like,
no kidding.
Content here. You know what I mean? Like, all those things. And if we always focus on like the negative parts of the situation or the scenario, the outcome's never going to look anything. The situation that we're currently in is never going to look good until you transition your perspective and reframe it to something of value that makes a difference and really gives you a new perspective and a new hope for what it is. And be flexible. And when a challenge arises, just be resilient to having the outcome.
If you enjoy the podcast, please do us a favor and head to your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. It helps a ton. And there's a reason all the podcasts you listen to ask you to do this. We want to continue to encourage people in the middle of their difficult seasons, and your ratings help boost our podcast visibility and the stories of our guests. Did you pause it and leave a review? If so, thank you. All right. Back to our conversation. Yeah, so I heard a lot of good words in there. It sounded like trust in the Lord's like purposes, right? Flexibility and resilience to like adapt to the current circumstances and situation, recognizing that it's an opportunity, right? Rather than, like just a total setback to the original, which is probably really tied to the flexibility side of things. Yeah. And then lastly, like what I heard a little bit is like, hey, like be vulnerable to like share like, hey, this isn't where I want to be. To be able to allow other perspective in from other people.
Totally, man. And I think too, just in such a big transition, like moving out to Hawaii for me was like, it was because I wanted to marry Maddie, my fiance. Like that's why I moved to Hawaii. She lived in Hawaii. I wanted to be closer to her so we could date. Like I had to make a decision for something that wasn't work. Like I had to make a decision for my future. And like, if we're talking about like creating things that, I want to create something that makes generational impact. The only way to make generational impact is to create something that can provide generational impact in your own family line. Totally. So like this is part of the plan. You know what I mean? So it's interesting, but definitely being vulnerable, and that's something that I've had to learn so much. And preparing for marriage is like being vulnerable and just sharing and communicating the things that you're going through, and being okay with like letting other people in. Specifically your, my future spouse, but also just in general, like telling people like you're struggling, like it's not going good, and like humbling yourself before them and humbling yourself before the Lord to like ask for help. It sounds like cliche, but it's like so true. Like, well,
it's cliche because it's true, and it's crazy hard to do, especially like I mean, I'll say, especially for me, but like, I think for somebody who's in a leadership position, it's really hard to do. For somebody who's maybe been really successful in their lifetime and like been looked at in that way, and a part of your identity is tied to that, like really hard to do. And so like true authentic vulnerability, like you don't come by it that often.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's so challenging to be vulnerable, but again, the outcome of being vulnerable is just closer relationships, which will help you to get to where you want to go.
Well, and honestly, like what's cool about this, like when people are on like, because someone can come on this podcast, share their story and kind of stay up here, you know, like 5-10 feet deep. But if somebody comes in and goes here, like that story is significantly more impactful than this one. And 100%. Like vulnerability is like a way to connect with people in a really profound way. And it's super contagious. Like, I don't know if you've noticed that in your life, but like when you're 100%. Vulnerable, it's like, oh, this is a safe space. I can be that way. Oh,
it empowers other people. It empowers other people to do the same. I mean, like anytime you're in a conversation, think about like when you're at, you know, on a mission trip or you're in a group with a group of people, like you're vulnerable. The next person feels comfortable to do that as well, right? Yeah. You're empowering that vulnerability. And I think, again, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. As a leader, it's tough to be vulnerable, and you kind of find the balance, especially when you're like stressed about work or whatever it is, because they're the people that you're leading. But like, hey, we're struggling here. I'm struggling here. How can you help me? You know, I tell my employees all the time, I'm like, yo, like I really want to get that to you right now, but like I got this to do and I'm really struggling. Like, can you get it to me this way instead, so that I can make sure that I can sign off on that or get to where we need to go, you know? So I think like just being okay, like sharing, like you're human no matter what leadership position you're in.
Yeah.
And I think just sharing that is just so important for overall growth and allows other people to feel comfortable to do that too.
Yeah. And the lie that like prevents that is like, dude, what are they going to think? I'm going to lose my influence. Whatever the thing is, it's an identity-based lie of some form. It gets twisted in different ways depending on people's situations and stories. Yeah. But like, I mean, maybe you could correct me, but I've never received a negative consequence from my vulnerability. Like, and I can't say that I've heard other people be like, dude, I was vulnerable here and it like totally didn't pan out. Right. I'm confident that's been the case, but like more often than not, it's like what the story you make up in your head is not actually the real story.
100%. Totally agree. And you say it out loud, and even just in saying it out loud, you can hear it. And then why?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're like, well, it's not as big as I thought it was.
Right. Yeah,
so, dude, so you shared a lot of stuff at the beginning, like from the jump on, hard things that you've been through. But is there a question I wanted to ask you is, what's the hardest thing in your life that you've been through you wouldn't take back? Maybe it's one of those things, but maybe it's not.
I mean, honestly, I would never take back any challenge that I've been through, like in general. So like that's kind of hits all of them all at once. But I guess to kind of touch on what the specific one I shared, you know, that the first one, like I definitely wouldn't take that one back. In terms of like one that I'm going through right now, like is the transition to Hawaii. Like would not take that back. God does not want me anywhere else right now. And I think that's like the same situation in all of them, like knowing that they made me who I am today. They made the business what it is today. And I just think that with challenges that you go through in your life, you cannot look back on them and ever take any of them back, because they define who you are now.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with, you know, some friends that I aspire to in business the other day, and basically they're, you know, I was just like, oh man, like, you know, you guys are in a much different position than I am, you know, like, and like financially or whatever it may be. And they're like, would you trade places with us right now? And I said, no. And they're like, it's not that easy, is it? You know what I mean? Like they're everything that I would aspire to be, but I wouldn't even want to be in their shoes.
Right.
Like right now. Like, because I really enjoy what I'm doing. Like it's, you cannot play that game. So any challenge that you go through, like you just can't, I would recommend not trying to take it back. Just endure the challenge and keep moving, man.
Yeah. So, have you found, like, because you're currently in a hard season in, like this transition to Hawaii, have you found that the season that you discussed, in college or sophomore year, and any other hard season or difficulty you've been through has like had an impact on the now, like, and have you even been able to recognize in the 4 months, like some of the things that you learned and utilized them?
Yeah, I think God's past faithfulness is representation for God's current and future faithfulness. I think that that challenge, if that wouldn't have happened, this transition wouldn't have been the way that it was, right? Like we get better for future challenges. The challenge may be harder than it was previously, but we're better as a result of the past ones that help us to get through the current ones and the future.
Yeah, leveling up.
So for me, like those things definitely have helped along the way. And I think the more that you lean into it, the quicker you realize that you can get out of the challenge faster if you just realistically just have a better perspective towards the challenge.
Yeah.
Because a lot of a challenging moment, maybe for me, is like the first couple months was me just like being mad or frustrated or grumpy because I didn't want to choose anything else. You know what I mean? And like if I just humbled myself before myself and just like probably reframe my perspectives on it, then the outcome and the current moment probably would have been a little bit better quicker. You know what I mean? And totally. I'm finally come around. We always come around, but how fast do you want to get there? Like, and you kind of steer the ship there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a lot of situations.
Yeah. I was talking to, his name's Steve Magnus. He's an author. He wrote a book called Do Hard Things, and he's like a sport performance coach. And he was talking about how when hard things come, like all the voices, everything that's like clamoring for our attention, like everything just gets muted.
Yeah.
And it all like falls to the floor. And you like, in a way, it's kind of like destruction has ensued. Everything's reset. And you get to then define like and describe to your life what gets a voice at that point. Like you almost get to reset and reprioritize. And I love that visual picture of like, all this noise, all this chaos, all this swirling, just difficulty hits. And then now you get to look around and go, okay, what actually do I want to give voice to? And like, I'd be curious if like in this moment, if you've experienced that, like, okay, now that I've in Hawaii, what am I giving voice to now? Like that was trying to take my attention and time, or maybe it was, but I never gave attention to, or what have I removed and stripped away, and how have things reset?
Yeah, man. I think the things that I've given voice to in the past is like, or currently even, like not allowing myself to actually enjoy and have joy in. I think that I thought, Maggie says this to me, like, why can't you just be like happy about this situation? What's wrong with like being able to like rest a little bit more than you used to? What's wrong with being able to like go down to the beach? Like you don't have to make things harder than they have to be. Like they really don't have to be that hard. For me, it was like, if I'm not grinding and working hard, then I'm not doing anything. And
something's wrong.
Yeah. Something's wrong, right? Like I used to get in the car and drive across the country and wake up at 4:35 in the morning, go do a pop-up at a gym for the whole entire day, get home at 9, and then do it the next day. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I'll drive through the night. And Maggie's like, what are you doing? Like, that's not like, you don't get an award for that. It doesn't, just because you're like making it look harder doesn't mean you get an award. And you just like think that like that's the way that it has to be. And sometimes like realistically, like there's a smarter outcome. Like there's a smart way to do that could be more effective. So, changing and reframing. And I think I understood your question completely, but if I'm not on that path, and just correct me here. But I think reframing, like listening to you're basically talking about listening to the voices that you have inside your head, right?
In a way, like I think there are lots of them, and a lot of times, like life's happening, and you're not even able to like isolate them. Everything's so loud, but then when you hit that reset moment, you're like, okay, what do I actually want to give voice to?
Yeah, 100%. That's super interesting because that's been very impactful in my life, because I was sitting in a Bible study one time, and it's basically talking about the two voices. There's two voices, right? You have one voice that's positive, one voice that's negative. The negative voice is, Satan. The positive voice is the voice of the Spirit, right?
Yeah.
And the one that you give voice to is the one that's going to determine the outcome that you have. So for me, if you don't sit back and think about the voices that you're listening to, like you said, and kind of get to that level spot, you're going to constantly listen to this one because that one is actively against you, working against you all the time. And for some reason, we have this tendency to go to the negative voice immediately, and we don't listen to the positive voice as much. It's like we have this self-loathing perspective where it has to be this way, right? And the positive one, it just seems too easy. Like, okay, let me wake up and eat breakfast in the morning and then go on a walk and get some sunshine outside. That just seems too easy. Instead, like, let me not eat breakfast, let me starve myself and keep working until, you know what I mean, until I'm blue in the face. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like listening to that voice that's going to give you life rather than listening to the voice that's not going to bring you life is just so incredibly important. And not being distracted by that negative voice and truly believing that the positive voice is meaning well and the negative voice doesn't need to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So, dude, I've loved, it's crept up a few times now. Like, you're getting married and you have this person who you've really let in, and just her willingness to call you out on stuff. Yeah. And, you know, like, obviously you have to be vulnerable to some extent, but like, just talk about, like, now that you're entering into this new season, you know, about to be married, like what you've seen, the value of letting somebody be that close. And, you know, for this concept of growth through like suffering, because you even said, you know, I don't know if it was on air, but you said, like, it's work, man. Like, this relationship is work. You know, you think about that, suffering leads to character. Like, how have you seen that play out in this, you know, your engagement heading into marriage?
It's the biggest accountability partner I've ever had in my life, realistically. Like, accountable to, because she sees the negative, the positive. She doesn't just see like the voice that's talking to my employees. She sees the one that's like after talking to the employees and frustrated about the conversation, or you know, frustrated about the current outcome, or stressed about money or whatever it is. Like, she sees all of that stuff. Yeah. So being able to like actually be accountable to real things, and like, I believe that makes me 10 times better, just because I'm hearing a different voice and a different perspective. She's the one that can kind of put me in my place, like in any regard, you know, and like talk to me, like, and tell me how it is. And when she tells me how it is, it makes me be just 10 times better. And she fills in the gaps where I'm weak, you know, in the places that I'm weak, she fills the gap. And then I become better because of that gap, or I see a different perspective all the time, you know. I'm the one that's like, run. She's the one that's like, run, get some sleep, rest, recover, be ready to run again. You know what I mean? I'm just like, I'm sitting there like, no, let's just keep going. Like, let's beeline forward. But like, I found myself making smarter decisions in business. I found myself enjoying like life more. I found myself just like looking at things differently, or, you know, serving my team in a different way, or like, you know, just all these different things that I don't normally think about. Those are the things that I've been able to learn and grow in and be accountable to, because they're going to see the version of you, no matter what it is. They're going to see you, you know what I mean? Right. And that's the biggest thing. Like, me being able to allow to be seen by her, so that I can become a better version of me for the other people. So other people are actually going to get a better me, just as a result of me being in a relationship with her, because she holds me accountable to growing. And that's the same way in both ways. And you're refined, and if you allow yourself, if you're humble enough to allow yourself to be refined by the person that you're, you know, gonna get married to, I think that provides such a better outcome. You know, they say like 2 is better than 1. Like, yes, you know, I mean, even talking about like their idea and perspective of building wealth, like the quickest way to be more wealthy is to get married, like, because you're bringing in 2 people that can help you to get to where you want to go, rather than just being on your own, right? You know, and kind of working together as a team. And that's something that Maggie and I have been talking about so much, is like the idea of working together as a team to get to where I want to go. The second we're not working together as a team, that's when everything hits the fan, you know. But like, when we're working together, we are unstoppable, you know. Like, so exciting that I can look at having a spouse that is going to help me and everything that we're doing be unstoppable. And I'm so thankful that we're not working on 2 different projects.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Working under the same mission and goal. You know, I read tons of books. Like, I want LRX to be as big as Nike, like as big as Lululemon. Like, that's where we're going. And there's space in the industry for LRX to come in, to have like a faith-rooted organization that's focused on customer experience and service, to come and rival these other companies and be there to make a genuine impact in our communities. And like, I read books by the founder of Nike, or the founder of Lululemon, or like all these different things, and I see, like, the Nike book, the end of it is divorce. The book by the founder of Reebok, end of it's divorce. And I'm sitting there like, heck no, that's not going to happen. Like, just because I have this big goal and mission of like building this company does not mean that that's the end all be all situation. We're going to do it together, and we're going to create the outcome together and the impact together. That's what the goal is. And I'm so thankful that we get to do that together. It's like, it brought me so much joy when she made the decision to like transition to that. 'Cause it's basically like, I believe in you in this, so let's do it, and that's just like, so I feel like so impactful for me. So
yeah. Well, it's cool listening to you talk, because there's an element of like, you're not saying this overtly interpersonally, but like, you view her as your teammate, and it's really easy to view your spouse when they're like calling you out as against you, and it's like, no, this person said they commit their life to you, like they're for you, even if they're for you for themselves, like they're still for you, like the best version of you is the best thing for them. And so it's like, but it's hard to like remind yourself in the moment in particular that that's true. But it sounds like, like that's generally the way that you're operating, and hearing the things she's saying, which is like awesome, because it's such a good foundation for where you guys are.
Yeah. And reiterate, like, if you're getting married or you're married, like, it is 100% work. Like, when people say it's work, like, this will probably be the hardest thing that you'll ever do. Like, is just being humble enough to commit to together and working towards a common goal. Like, it's, so.
It's a ton of sacrifice.
Yes.
Then have some kids thrown in the mix, and it's like, you don't exist anymore. It's like, in a way, everything that you were has been given to other people. So, dude, one thing I thought it a couple of times you've been talking, because I'm similar. I'm like, dude, go, be productive. How efficient can I be? And there's a story in the Bible, in the book of Ezra, that like, when I read it, has always stuck with me. And so the Israelites were in Babylon, and they were going back, and they were going to like rebuild Israel, Jerusalem. And they had all this like wealth with them that God had just miraculously blessed them with. And they had to go across the desert, and like the safe long way was like 6-month trek. And they stop like a weekend. Ezra's like, dude, we're going to stay here for 3 days, and we're just going to like pray, fast, seek the Lord. And I read that. I was like, dude, I would be like, we got a 6-month journey. Why are we staying here for 3 days? Like, we got to go, And anyways, at the end of that, they go through the dangerous route, which is like where the robbers were. There's less water. And they get there like 3 months faster than they would have otherwise, because it says God protected them. And I'm just like, I was so convicted by that, of like, it feels slow to wait and to rest, but like God can do whatever he wants, with your heart posture in the right place, and he can make much more out of your effort, than you can with a full 100%. So
100%. Maggie says that to me every single week. She is like, we were recording a podcast the other day, and we set like train, live, rest goals, and we'll release the podcast this Monday. And her rest goal is like, she's like, my rest goal, it's like to take a Sabbath every single week. And she just is like, so unapologetically like, God can do more when I'm resting than when I'm working. And I'm just like, yo, stop. It's true. Like, it's so true. You need that time to rest and recover, and like be prepared, for what it is that he wants you to do, and he will do more on that day, or in that time. So taking that time to like have wisdom when you're moving fast, you don't always make good decisions. You do need to move fast in business and in life, like in certain circumstances, but you don't always make good decisions.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you start a workout and it's like a 10-minute AMRAP and you go 100 miles per hour for the first minute. Well, that was kind of dumb. Like, you're not going to make good decisions later on in the workout, and you're probably going to rest and not get the time or score that you wanted to get. So I just think it's so important, like taking that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, dude, this has been super fun. For people that maybe didn't know much about LRX, or they did, but something you said in your story or just in talking really struck with it, like how can they keep up with what you're doing with LRX, keep up with you, get connected, ask questions, etc.?
Yeah. So we launched a podcast. It's called the Prescription Podcast. That's
awesome.
You can follow us on Instagram at LRX Podcasts. On Instagram, it's on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music as well. Follow LRX, our activewear brand, at LRX Apparel on Instagram. And then just the website is lrxapparel.com. And then my personal Instagram, which I'm going to be creating more content just on motivation, purpose, impact, those types of things, running a business, is just at Ryan A. Last name Husband, like husband, wife. And those are the places that I would recommend kind of checking things out. We are going to be creating some awesome new content over the next couple of weeks and months and years, just moving into the future. And I'm just excited to create stuff that's generally going to impact and serve our community and audience. So
yeah, awesome. Well, I've always appreciated you guys, and it's like, it's not just lip service. Like, I mean, meeting you, like you living out what you're saying you want to be as a company. And so I'll back you on that. Like, you guys are, impacting people in the right way and caring about people in the communities. So I appreciate you guys and what you're doing, and appreciate you. And thanks for spending some time, man. It was super fun to get to know more about you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Do Hard Things podcast by Elite SRS. We hope you are encouraged today and have a newfound hope to persevere. Be sure to subscribe for more great episodes and conversations. And if you ever want to watch an episode, check out our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/EliteSRS. Have a blessed day.